Hello, everyone, and welcome back to The Path. I'm your host, Luke Hastings, and today's episode is with none other than Mr. Salinas, Herman Salinas, otherwise known on Instagram as the.syndicate.of.strength, the Syndicate of Strength. A lot of you guys have been following him, and him and I got connected a long time ago. He's a fellow content creator in the masculinity space, and I've known for a long time it'd be good to have him on the pod. We finally did. So today we had two conversations, more or less. We talked about the state of modern Christianity in the West and the trend that's taking place among young men toward not only Christianity, but also toward specifically Orthodoxy and Catholicism. So we broke down sort of what that looks like and maybe the reasons for why that's happening and some cautions for young men that are seeking answers in their faith journeys. So that's a good convo. And then another conversation we had tied to that is about passport bros and the state of modern dating and the pros and cons of finding a woman here versus abroad. So really a great convo, some great points made with Herman. So dig in. I know you guys will enjoy.
I don't know if you've noticed, like, just there's like this explosion of the masculinity content in the last 5 years.
I mean, I think I was a part of it. I think I was I didn't really notice it because I was riding that wave, but I always followed it in YouTube.
Right.
That's where I started following it, but I didn't really get on social media really in much of a capacity at all until I started my account. So before I started my account, I wasn't on Instagram or Facebook or Twitter or Snapchat or anything. I wasn't on anything.
Right.
And so I didn't really notice the explosion because I was part of it.
Yeah, I noticed, so I started posting content in 2020, and like I said, I didn't know anything about this space at all. It was just initially just motivational type of content, like rah, you can do it type stuff, because that's what I felt my calling was, just motivate people, just uplift people, make them feel good about themselves, just keep going type of deal. But as I spend more time on the internet, and especially in the Instagram realm, I noticed all this talk about masculinity and toxic masculinity, and I'm like, wait, hold up, that's not what being the man's about. That's not what masculinity is. So that's when I started making my content around that, and that's where it sort of just evolved. But yeah, I don't consider myself like a masculinity page or anything like that. It's a motivational page. It's just empowerment towards strengthening overall. But as a man, obviously, masculinity and manhood is tied into that.
Yeah. So you would say it never started out for you as a masculinity page. It was just empowering people, encouraging people.
Yeah, exactly. But like I said, as I spent more time on the internet, I noticed that there are a lot of lost men out there, or single mothers wondering, how do I raise a man? What should I be telling my boy? And so with that thought in mind of just trying to be of genuine service, as I progressed along my own journey and all the lessons and realizations that I think are helpful to me, I just share those on my page. Just trying to be helpful. But yeah, like I said, it just it evolved. I just noticed this explosion of it. And on that subject though, I don't know if you've noticed within the whole masculinity manhood realm over the past couple of years, it's just it seems like there's this trend towards coming to the faith.
Mm-hmm. I have noticed that.
You noticed that, right? So I know you noticed that, but I don't know if you've noticed lately of not just coming to Christianity faith, but there's this newer trend of Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity. I'd like to know if you have a take on that, if you have any opinions on that, and what do you think that is?
It's really interesting you bring that up because I was actually planning on dedicating a whole episode to that. And maybe that's what this episode is. Maybe this episode we dig into that because that's a really fascinating trend that I've noticed as well. But what I want to know from you is what frame of reference are you approaching this from? So I'll go first. My dad was a Baptist preacher. Okay. So that's the faith tradition I grew up in. I've researched Catholicism, I've researched Orthodoxy, but I'm neither of those. I'm still Protestant, not necessarily aligning with Baptist anymore. I would say if you had to pick one denomination that most closely aligns with my theology, it would probably be some version of Baptist, but I'm not necessarily aligning as a Baptist anymore. Um, that being said, I believe that if you believe that Jesus Christ is the Son of God, He's Lord and Savior of your life, and you know you're anchored in the Scripture for truth, I don't really have time to be upset at you about if you're my flavor of Christian or not. I don't really have time to be upset with you if you're a Catholic or an Orthodox or, a Presbyterian or a Baptist or whatever the case is. As long as you align on those basic principles, then I think we're buddies. So that's kind of my take. So where are you coming from? Just so I know and everybody knows.
My parents were Catholic technically, but they never really pushed God on me or try even really talked about God much. It was always just kind of this idea of God, like a sky daddy type deal. Told me there is a God, there's a heaven and a hell, and that's pretty much all I really knew about it. I, on my own, got interested in who Jesus actually was when I was about 13. And that's where I guess my faith journey started. And eventually down the line, it would ebb and flow between like new age type of spirituality, kind of digging into that and what all that stuff means, and just kind of, reverting back to just standard biblical truth. I went down the rabbit hole, researched it, never really bought into the beliefs, but I would look into it. And eventually I left all that alone and stuck to Christianity, I guess faith. But yeah, I don't really align with any denominations or anything like that. I wouldn't consider myself any specific type of, I guess, denomination. I'm still researching. What I'm doing now is actually researching into all the theology. Like I said, I read the Bible, I read the Bible daily and look for the truths in there and the wisdom that it gives you. But now what I've been doing is looking into doctrine. Why do people believe in Trinitarianism, Unitarianism, modalism? Once saved, always saved. All the different doctrines that people have and the arguments around them, like they all come from the Bible, but they're misinterpretations of the Bible. And so that's where I'm at in my journey currently is digging into all the doctrines. What do I believe for myself? You know what I'm saying? So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at currently. But regarding to the question that I asked and that we're discussing right now is, yeah, I've noticed this trend towards Catholicism and Orthodox Christianity. And looking into Catholicism, the Protestants, they always say right off the bat, like, oh, it's pagan. They're basically idol worship. It's paganism disguised as Christianity. But the core beliefs are there, right? Like you said, Jesus Christ, Lord and Savior. But, there's veneration towards the saints. And other people look at that like, no, it's not just veneration. It's idol worship. Like, is it really? If you hear some Catholics talk, they're telling you, no, we're not. It's not idol worship. It's just, veneration. But there's this hardcore Jesus goers like, why does anybody but Jesus have to be even acknowledged? You know what I'm saying? So
100%.
that's where I'm at with it. I just noticed the trend, and like I said, I'm not Catholic, but I was raised in a Catholic family. Being Mexican, it's all straight Catholic, so the imagery has always been there.
Yeah.
So I got respect for it, but
Yeah.
it's just a new
Yeah.
trend that I've noticed.
Yeah, man. That it's fascinating. It really hit me last year. I had a client, a one-on-one client that was considering Eastern Orthodoxy, and I found it really interesting, and it sparked a hunch that I had, and so I started asking him. Sure, man, Eastern Orthodoxy, that's like a valid, they believe Jesus Christ is Lord and He's the only way. So I'm chilling. I'm not worried about it if you want to become Eastern Orthodox. Okay. So I was just saying, all right, what draws you to that? Like, what is it about that faith tradition that draws you in? And he started naming off these different things and just these different traits about it. Like there's strong tradition there. There's this sort of ancient wisdom there that's because they've been doing this for a long time, right? Certainly longer than the Baptists, certainly longer than the Pentecostals and you know, Episcopalians. We could go on. Like Eastern Orthodoxy has been around for a long time, arguably longer than the Catholics. And I'm not going to start that debate, but they both think that they've been around the longest, right? So, a long time. And so there's this groundedness, there's this strong foundation. There's just so much reverence and a somber weight and gravitas to how they do church and how they treat the Bible and how they treat everything. And so he's explaining these things. There's a strength, and there's it's a very masculine faith tradition, you know. Whereas you look at maybe a more charismatic faith tradition, a more Assemblies of God, or one of those more charismatic faith traditions, it seems a little bit ungrounded and untethered sometimes, comparatively speaking, to the stable, unmoving nature of like an Orthodox or Catholic tradition. And so my client's explaining these things to me, and I notice that nothing that he says has anything to do with theology. It has everything to do with how they do church and how kind of the methodology of their worship services and the robes and the decorum and the rituals. And it's really not about the theology as much. And then I said, okay, and I'm talking to my client, I said, let's scroll up in the notes here. Almost everything that you just said that you are attracted to in the Orthodox Church is almost verbatim things that you have said that you want in your life personally. And I think that is exemplary of what a lot of young men are going through. I think a lot of men want strength. They want ancient wisdom. They want strong traditions. They want a grounded basis for things. They want to feel weight and gravitas and meaning to their spirituality. And if I'm being real, I think modern Western Protestantism has failed miserably at that. The modern evangelical movement, Protestantism, including my childhood denomination, the Baptists, most of us have failed miserably at providing that experience, right? In our space, the non-denominational churches are kind of the butt of all the jokes, right? It's like the rock concert you go to. It's the daddy God. It's the waving in the wind. It's just not, it doesn't feel masculine. And so I see a lot of young men turning to Orthodoxy and Catholicism, not even because, oh, they sold me on this theology point. It's because I want something that was first and that was grounded and that's foundational, that's, immovable and solid. And it's not like the flavor of the month, like non-denominational. What does that even mean? Like, what do you believe? And this denomination over here, that one over there, like, give me the OG church, right? And it's more emotional than anything. I think it's an emotional longing to have stability in your religiosity, and it kind of outsources your power. It says, you know what? Instead of reading the Bible for myself and really coming to my own theological conclusions and then aligning myself with a certain church, I'm going to outsource that to what I see as the most stable version of religion. And I'm going to let them tell me how to be. And that's like a balm. That's like a soothing balm for guys who have not had that in their lives and maybe are not secure in themselves. Like, yes, tell me the right thing. Tell me what to do. Anchor me in this grounded ancient wisdom and tradition. That all being said, and I'll close this ramble off with this. I got guys in my men's group that are Catholic. I've got guys in my men's group that are leaning more toward Orthodoxy in some ways. I've got followers all of the same too. I don't have an issue with it. I welcome it. I'm fine with it. I don't plan on converting anytime soon, but that doesn't mean that I don't openly embrace those guys. For me, like, if that's where you are, great. I don't have a problem with it. But I caution, to your point, there's a trend moving that way. And I'm just cautioning the listeners and anybody who wants to talk with me on it later. If you want to go that way, that's fine. But make sure you're doing it because of theological reasons, not because you have an emotional need for security and stability that you're not able to find on your own. Because I think that's at the root of it for a lot of men.
I agree with you. I agree with you. My own thoughts towards it is whether it's a trend or whether there's just this collective consciousness towards wanting a return to tradition and a return to just a set of beliefs that's been tried and true. There's this spiritual awakening that's been happening for a while, and that new age sends you down all these different routes. And everybody that's been in the new age, they say there's no fulfillment there, but people always say there's fulfillment in Christ. And so that's why I think there's been this trend towards the faith, Christianity, but now there's this newer trend of Catholicism and Orthodoxy. And I think it's because, to your point, men are looking for something stable and immovable, which is masculine. Essentially, men are looking for a masculine version of faith. And you've heard this talked about multiple times. I'm sure that the church has become effeminate. You hear that all the time. And like I said, there doesn't seem to be any structure really, I guess, in non-denominational churches. Like, it could be a rock concert one week, it could be something else. It just depends. Like how you said, the flavor of the week. Maybe the church has become effeminate, the church has become more tolerant. There's these, drag race churches now, supposedly. I've seen it on the internet. I don't know if it's true. Could be clickbait, but you see it, right? And so, in wanting to be in the faith, in some sort of tradition, I think men are looking and they're saying, Protestantism is not that. It's not what they're looking for. They're looking for something structured, something stable, something immovable. And they look on the surface at Catholicism and Orthodoxy, and they say, that looks like something I would want to be a part of. And to your point, I do agree with you though. Like, on the surface, it may seem, masculine, immovable, stable, but they should look into the theology. I think I agree with you on that point. It's just,
Yeah.
do you want to just be a part of something, faith that seems masculine, or do you want to be a part of something that's going to better your spiritual journey towards Christ?
And see, that's the problem is there's a lack of masculinity in the men. And so they are not able to discern, am I drawn to this because I feel the Spirit of God in it? Or am I drawn to this because my emotions are yearning for something solid? And this looks and feels solid. Another trend I've seen with both Catholicism and Orthodox converts, and not to beat a dead horse, but guys, if that's you, I'm not upset. I'm not judging you. I just want it to happen for the right reasons. And I think, as with any trend, there's a lot of people that are swept up into that trend for the wrong reasons, right? And that's what I'm speaking to now. I've seen a lot of guys in our space that maybe they're not Christian at all for a few years, and then they become Christian for a year or two, and then they become Catholic, for example, or Orthodox, and then they make that denominational structure their whole personality. They make that those teachings their whole personality. And it's not even so much about Christianity as a whole anymore, but as niche as they can be about that specific denomination, that specific faith tradition. And I don't think it's a net positive. It really just narrows their influence to an echo chamber of guys who are on the same boat. And I don't think when we get to heaven, Jesus is going to say, "Well memed, my good and faithful servant. Good job making all the memes. Good job showing those Protestants what's what. I have a special place in heaven for you because dunked on all the Protestants." I don't think that's what's going to happen.
Yeah, I agree. Like you say, it ends up becoming just, tribalism, my team, my flavor of Christianity, or whatever you want. My theology is better than yours. Let me dunk on you. And like how you said, it just becomes an echo chamber. And it definitely narrows your influence, like you said, towards just sharing the gospel.
Exactly.
And, the gospel is what it is, regardless of you're Catholic, Orthodox, or whatever. And so if you, like how you said, if your whole personality is just Catholicism or Orthodoxy, and this is what I am, then you're kind of just speaking to those people, really. And there's very few people that have the maturity and discernment to say, hey, okay, I don't agree with the whole of their theology. Let me just take out bits and pieces of what they're saying. If it's true wisdom. A lot of people don't think that way. They think, oh, this guy's Catholic. They're all idol worshippers. I don't want to hear anything he has to say, or whatever it may be, whatever flavor it is. And so there's a lot of people that think that way. So, like how you said, there's this narrowing of influence if you kind of just stick to one thing and you make that your whole either personality or your whole what your page is about.
Yeah.
So like it's not conducive to sharing the gospel or to playing your part and bringing people to God.
Right. Yeah, I mean, I love, like, if somebody is not a Christian at all and they get converted to Catholicism directly or Orthodoxy directly or Protestantism directly, it's like, good for you, man. Like, as long as you believe Jesus Christ is Lord and Savior of your life and he's the only way and et cetera, those basic things, then I'm happy for you. But what I don't like is, like, well, some of these guys are going to be converting them into a divisive faith. It's like, welcome to the real Christian team. Let's, like, come on in. You're on the good side. Let's dunk on everybody else. It's like, that's not out of the, like, we have enough problems in the modern West. We have enough issues. There's enough going on. We do not need to add to that by being divisive amongst ourselves. Like, that's just absolutely a waste of time. I have zero time to try to convert a Catholic or an Orthodox guy who believes the same basic things that I do. I got zero time for that. Let's lock arms and let's face the real enemy here. If you have time to do that, I would just question, like, what your motives are, right? Like, kind of looping back to what I said earlier, I think the motives are, I want to be grounded. I want to be right. I want to be stable. I want to be solid. And I can't find that in myself. And so I'm going to outsource that to my religion, and I'm going to put on the t-shirt and I'm going to say, we're the best. We've got the truth and everybody else sucks, because I'm not able to find that as an individual man. Right. I think it's a weakness ultimately that causes that over identification with a unique faction.
Yeah, completely. I completely. What I just thought that just came to mind. You know how guys are that way about the sports teams. You know what I'm saying?
No,
it's
100%, bro.
it's basically just that with religion. My team is better than yours. Yours sucks. Hey, I'm gonna dunk on you in heaven. When we all get to heaven, we're gonna be at the gates, and you're not gonna coming in because you weren't right. You weren't on my team. That's what I see. It's kind of becoming in the theology realm, I guess.
It's like Chelsea versus Manchester United. Like, they're basically from the same place. They just hate each other.
Yeah, that's how I was like, man. Like you said, there's no point in it. There's no point in it. But
Yeah.
like you said, I think, man, instinctually we're tribal at our core. Like we want to protect what's ours, and if guy doesn't have that with the family, or he doesn't have that within his own, like in the real world, he does it vicariously through sports or through religion or what have you.
Very true. It is much like that sports loyalty. The only other thing I really wanted to say on that bit was, I want to warn guys about choosing a denomination based on its historical evidence, because a lot of guys are like, Orthodox, that was the original church. Like, that's where it started. It traces back to the Middle East where, Jesus was, et cetera, et cetera. And then you have the Catholics who are like, no, no, no. Like, Peter was the first pope. He's the one who started it all. And God and Jesus said, you know, on this rock I will build my church. He's referring to Peter's new name. And so he said, that's where the church started, is with Peter and Catholicism. And then the Baptists, they know dang well it wasn't them, so they don't even try to say that. Catholics and Orthodoxy, I think, are the main two that claim to be the first Christians, right? So that's fine, but my caution is just, you should not go to the denomination that was first just because they were first. And here's why. When the Bible was being written, like the canonized Bible that Protestants, Orthodox, and Catholics all look at, right? The Pauline letters like Galatians, Ephesians, 1st, 2nd Corinthians, all those. When those were being written, even within those books, Paul is already having to call out heresy in the church. Before his ink could even dry, Paul is calling out heresy in the church. Like the church, like truly the first church. You can call it Orthodox, you can call it Catholic. I'm calling it Galatians, Ephesians. Like in those churches, the Corinthians especially, certainly the first ones, certainly, Paul is calling out heretical teaching and behavior in the actual Bible. We're talking square one. And so to say, well, I'm going to base my religion off of history and off of the early church, that's a fallacy, man, because the very first churches were being called out in the Bible for how they got it wrong. That's why we have the Bible, is so we can know what's right. That's why Paul wrote those letters, and why the canon is the way it is so that we can look at it and say, okay, here's how I discern what's heretical and what's not. Here's how I discern what's right and what's wrong. And so just because the early church did something does not mean that that was the right way to do it, right? Because the very first people that were doing church in, the Corinthian church, in the Ephesian church, they were getting called out for major problems, before Paul's ink was even dry. So I think it's that emotionally driven desire. Oh, I want to be the OG. The Corinthians were the OGs and they were really messing up. So I don't think, and I mean, are we really going to look at the Catholic Church history and say they did everything right? Is anybody really going to do that? I don't think so. So let's not get all emotionally infatuated with this idea of the OG and the first. Like, not even the OGs got it right. Paul had to correct them out of the gate. So I think that's why we have the Bible, right? Is to help us discern.
Definitely. Yeah, first doesn't mean right. Basically, essentially, and the first people to do anything really are making all the mistakes to begin with. They're paving the path, like I said, the Bible is directing the path. So there's no need to attach to OGism. I was first.
The
I was
OGism,
first.
it's the real denomination. Thank you for listening. Something I wanted to let you guys know about that we don't talk about enough on the channel, on the podcast, is that we have a men's group. There's a Narrow Way Men inner circle that meets on a weekly basis, has accountability, goal setting, coaching from me, course access to the courses that I create, discounts with one-on-one coaching. And this group, I don't advertise it that much because it is something I'm trying to keep exclusive. So anybody that comes into this group is vetted by me personally. Hedman actually is one of the guys that just joined. I can't remember who suggested it, but I wanted him to join. The reason why I vet everybody for this group, it's not about the money. It's very competitively priced. The main reason I made it is to build connections. And so I want to benefit from this group personally. If you are aspiring to be a high value man and you are finding it hard to have local community and accountability with like-minded dudes that you want to be like in your local geographical area, then you may consider this group. All right. This group is helping guys live better lives. We're building community and not just letting anybody in. Serious inquiries only, serious men only. DM me on Instagram, the word group, if you're interested.
On the topic of trends, though, you've noticed, right, the MGTOW and the passport bro
Oh, yeah.
trends. Yeah, I know. I like to get your viewpoint on those because, like you say, you have the same viewpoints of everybody in the space, right? But it's slightly different. You typically have a slightly different take on it. So I'd like your opinions, if you don't mind, on if you have any on like the passport bro MGTOW scene. Like, do you think it's
Yeah. I think
right? You think it's a cop out?
that's tough because my logical brain wants to say, oh, yeah, we're having problems with women, but we're also having problems with men. We should point the finger at both sides. We should both take responsibility. But unfortunately, that's not how the world always works. Life is not always equal or fair. And I think it's entirely possible that women have suffered disproportionately from feminism and more than men have. And that the creation of masculinized, feminismized women in the modern US and the West has hurt women more than it has men, even though men may be the ones complaining more. Women may be the ones that have suffered more. And so I think it's entirely possible that there's a disproportionate number of masculine women compared to feminine men, which would mean that the passport bros have a good point, because the ideology of feminism and masculinized women has eroded the family structure in the West. We can all agree on that. Like all of our listeners are going to agree on that. Like feminism has eroded the family structure. Were there problems with were we executing the family structure perfectly as men in the 1950s? No, there's things that we needed to do better. But it was more or less modeled after what has served humankind for all of our existence. The man leading, the man providing, the woman supporting, the man being masculine, the woman being feminine. And as those things have been eroded in the West, it's kind of like, well, if I'm looking for a woman who is going to align with the gender roles that have served humanity for thousands and thousands of years, then America is probably the last place I want to look. I can't think of any other culture in the world that is less family centric than America or Western Europe. Can you?
Not really.
So I think
It makes sense.
I think they have a point, man. It's like,
then really you can't fault them. But I've seen the take that the men they can't make it here with women. They can't get women here, so that's why they go out to other countries because there's this idea that other women in other countries don't have any money, men in America do. So basically, they go over there and they just seem like a big shot.
that's also true.
So there's that viewpoint. And so there's the people calling the passport bros calling them out, like say, well, you can't get women here, so that's why you go over there. But is it really that? Is it that, or they just don't want the women here?
I mean, two things can be true at the same time, right?
That's also, like you said, because like I know that American women, or in any Western country really, their standards are almost unrealistic. So for the average man, like their standards are for the top 20% of men, and an average woman seems like she's not okay with dating an average man, which is on the opposite end. Men are okay with average men are okay with dating average women, but the opposite isn't true. Average women feel like they're settling if they get with an average man. And so all the women want these top 20% of men, and that's not most men. So either they're not being looked at at all, like all the average men are just invisible. And there's this factor of that to play too, that they just seem invisible. So why would men want women that don't have any interest in them whatsoever?
100%.
So
Yeah, it's
yes.
it's the social it's like a it's what's really interesting to me is the social economic gap that's happening, like the rich getting richer, the poor getting poorer. It's the same exact thing happening in the dating scene in the West and the relationship scene in the West. So if you're rich in America right now, it's great. Being rich in America has never been better. I would say the same is true if you're in the top 1% of men. Well, honestly, that's too loose. I would say maybe 0.1%. If you're in the top 0.1% of men, then you've never had more access to high quality women ever. This is you can't pick a better time to be in the top 0.1% of men in human existence. But that comes at the cost of everybody else. So in the same way that the socioeconomic middle class is disappearing, so is the middle class of average dating dudes. It's our options are getting destroyed in that class, right? And so, yeah, it's 150 years ago, you and I both at our ages would be married with multiple kids by now because 150 years ago, our options were limited to a 30-mile radius of where we lived. And the girls' options were limited to the same. And so we would have found each other and gotten married by now. This is going to be a hot take, right? But I've sat in marketing meetings for Walmart, like the world's largest retailer. They speak to women. The biggest marketing teams in the world all understand if you want to commoditize something and sell it and make money, you need to target women. You can call it sexist, but it's just real. They idolize like the shopper mom. Like, how do we reach the shopper mom in Walmart? Because that's who can spend the most money. And that ties to the feminine's desire to receive and consume and to latch on to things, right? And that's not a bad thing. But when that's exploited, then they're just consuming, consuming, consuming. And social media has done that in many ways. So social media feeds women the most commoditized, idealized, perfect look at relationships and dating. And the feminine dysfunction is to say, oh, well, I'm going to have that. And so to your point, now the standards are way out of proportion. And the average guy who doesn't fall for that as much is kind of sitting there like, well, what do I do? How do I move? How do I cash in, you know?
Right. Yeah, social media and dating apps have basically given the average woman access to the top 1% of men, which, like how you said, well, 150 years ago, even not that long ago, not even that long ago, wasn't the case.
Right.
Average women dated average men, but now social media and dating apps, it gives women access to the top 1% of men. So now average men are like, they're disgusted by them almost. They feel like they're settling because, women tend to date up. And so now, like, they want to date all the way up. He said average men are basically invisible. And so you see the whole MGTOW movement. Like, I've heard people say, it's these weak guys, they've given up. But is it really giving up, or is it just kind of seeing like it's a disinterest? Like, I don't, because I think how you made that point of masculine women, there are a lot of masculine women out there because of feminism or because they've had to be on their own and develop these masculine characteristics. Men are just as starved for genuine femininity as women are for genuine masculinity. We always talk about how men are not masculine really anymore, but the opposite is also true. There's a good portion of women that are just masculine women, and men are not attracted to them.
No.
So the MGTOW thing, maybe there's definitely aspects of just giving up. Like, I don't see the point anymore, so I'm just not going to date. But I think there's also an aspect of none of these women really interest me, and I don't want to pursue any of these women really. I don't see women around me that are worth pursuing. And tying into the passport bro ordeal is that women in foreign countries tend to be more feminine. They tend to have more of those traditional values, and that's what men are attracted to. I think a lot of men are just they have this mentality that the juice isn't worth the squeeze.
Yeah.
They view women, modern women, quote unquote modern women, they're either masculine or it just doesn't seem like it would worth pursuing. So they go to other countries in search of more feminine, agreeable women. But like I said, I also see the point of where people are just saying that they're weak men. They can't handle American women. Maybe there's a little bit of validity to that.
It's like
Maybe there's not.
can't or don't want to, right?
Yeah, it's either can't or don't want to. I think there's a little bit of both.
Yeah.
I think we see, but you know, obviously women are complaining about it, and there's that whole shaming tactic that's used. If women don't get what they want from men, they usually use shaming tactics. And so if you seeing women are seeing the trend that modern men don't want them, so they call them weak for not wanting them. They say you can't get us, which in reality, it's a lot of men they just don't want you. I don't know if you've noticed that.
Yeah, no, I totally have. But let me tell you something else I've noticed. I think that for the large majority of women, especially younger ones, like early to mid 20s, maybe late 20s as well, I think for most of those women, even though they might have been masculinized and they are trending more on the masculine side of things than the feminine side of things in many ways, they are still feminine at their very core. And maybe they don't know they want this, but deep down inside, they do want to find a man who they can be feminine around. And I've seen that from personal experience. Women who are kind of the boss babes, go-getters, very masculine characteristics that they've developed, sometimes more than the men that they're around. If they find a man who can be more masculine than her, more masculine than she is, then they will completely code switch. A lot of women are really not worth trying to save, in a sense of like, if she's from a spousal selection perspective, like if you're trying to look for a wife, yeah, you shouldn't try to go after the super masculine ones. If she is not automatically relaxing into a more feminine frame around you, you should not be trying to fix that. You know, your time is better spent elsewhere. But I will say from personal experience, from experience with my clients, if you can become masculine enough in relationship, then there are still women out there that want to roll with that. But I won't lie. Again, like we said before, I can't think of a single other culture in the world right now that is less family centric and more reversed polarity, where the women are more masculine, the men are more feminine. I can't think of a single culture that is worse off in that regard than the modern West. So, like Western Europe and the States and Canada. Like, can't think of, I think we have it the worst. And so, yeah, if you want to be a passport bro and move away, I mean, there's challenges with that for sure. And I think something you said earlier too is very valuable. Some of these, if you're going to do that, that's fine. But the caution that I would give you is you may not find genuine desire if you go outside of the States. Genuine desire being a woman who really wants you for you. Because to your point, outside of Western Europe, Canada, and the US, there's a lot less wealth. There's a lot less financial opportunity. And so if you go find you a hottie from the Philippines, I mean, yeah, that might work. But how truly honestly can you say she likes me for me? That's going to be a hard sell, because I've seen some of these dudes with some of these Filipina chicks. I've seen some of it. I'm like, man, I don't know. I don't know if she likes you for you. And so, but if you find a strong, independent boss babe in the States who is doing well for herself financially or well enough, and you can get her to relax into a feminine state around you, my man. I mean, you know that she likes you for you at that point. And so, the passport bros, they have some points, but you got to be careful with that. Because I don't know if you can know you're getting genuine desire if you're scooping a girl up out of poverty.
Yeah, I think there's a good point to that. It's kind of, pick your poison. Do you want the challenge of getting a woman from a Western country to have genuine desire for you, or just be the man that can get that from her? Because it's challenging. You have to obviously meet her standards, which is harder here in Western countries. Or do you want to take the easier route and go out of state, out of country, but then the challenge is you may not have genuine desire there. So it's there's a give and a take to everything. It seems like, which one do you want? I guess what men should ask themselves: which one would you rather have?
Right. And to be clear, there's two different sets of challenges. It's not that you couldn't find a girl in the Philippines or in Thailand or in southern Mexico, or it's not that you couldn't find a girl that doesn't have genuine desire. You could find one that's genuinely attracted to you. It's just going to be harder to know if that's real or not. It's going to be harder to discern, is this real genuine desire, or is this, I am changing her life with my financial stability?
Yeah,
That's
that's
just
a good,
that.
that's a good clarification. You could definitely find a woman that has genuine desire for you. It would just be harder to discern, and that's the challenge.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah. I mean, I
You
talk to guys on a regular basis that are like low key considering that.
really,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
yeah. Like I say, can you blame them though?
You absolutely cannot blame them. Yeah. So,
What do you think though in regards to, because like you said, America, Western countries, they're the least family centric. Do you think there's any hope for men in like America or Western countries? Do you think it's going to get worse? Or...
yeah, America is a social governmental experiment at this point. We are a very, very, very young country still. And those of us who are alive right now that are anywhere close to your and my age, we have not been alive in a time where America was not the world's superpower. So we don't understand the realities of like the global movement of things and like the historical movement of things, maybe we conceptually understand it, but we haven't experienced it, right? America right now, I would love to say it'll still be around in 100 years or so, but right now it looks like a flash in the pan to me. So I don't think there's a whole lot of hope of things getting better in America for men. So the men have to get better. As far as staying in America with like regards to dating, this is going to sound, it's like a step down from passport bro stuff, right? If you're dating in America, maybe look at the Eastern European girls that their families are from Ukraine or from Romania or from the Eastern or Europe, or maybe look at girls who grew up in a Hispanic home that still prioritizes the family. It's like, oh, your grandparents moved from Mexico or your parents moved from Mexico. That's probably a sign she's going to be more family centric. We have plenty of those families in the US. So as long as they're like pretty recently coming from those cultures, then those girls are going to be more likely to be family centric. You can be a passport bro in the sense of finding the right cultural, familial emphasis that you want without leaving the country. You just have to more or less reject your old culture.
I can see that. I can see that.
That's terrible to say, but it's been
It's
true in
real
my
though.
experience, man. It's like,
It's real though.
yeah,
You gotta be realistic about things.
yep.
Reject your own culture.
Oh my gosh.
It's the whole reject modernity, embrace,
Yeah.
insert whatever, whichever one you want.
Well, and what's so funny about that, kind of tying it all back together, is like the first half of our conversation was about religion and denomination, faith tradition specifically within Christianity. So what's funny is, in the same way that America used to have its own culture, but we've kind of lost that and it's kind of become degraded and just ambiguous, right? Like it's just
It's a melting
ambiguous. And I would say that's what's happened to Protestantism too. Like the Protestant faiths in America have become like America has, like soft, effeminized, all over the place. Hard to know what's what. Like, what does Protestantism really mean? Nobody really knows anymore. It can be like Episcopalians over here, Baptists over there, Church of God over there. Like, we don't really know. And America is like, well, what's America's culture anymore? It's degraded. Pretty much any European nation at this point, save the ones that have been completely colonized, have like more culture unique to them than America does anymore. For Americans, it's like, well, what kind of culture are you rejecting at this point? It's hard to say because that culture has crumbled so much. So I think that's where the religion conversation and the dating conversation tie in, is like we're faced with kind of abandoning things that have been corrupted and effeminized and are not really working anymore. And how do we navigate that? Do we go to the Catholicism where everything seems more structured? Do we go to the Philippines where everybody seems like they love us? you know, or do we choose another path that requires a little bit more self-examination and self-growth,
Definitely. There needs to be a rejection of ambiguity and a leaning towards boldness, because that's the opposite of ambiguity, is boldly. There's no ambiguity between what's a man, what's a woman. Boldly be a man, masculine man.
Yep.
Boldly proclaim your faith,
Yep.
and not just the central aspect of the faith. Christ is Lord, Jesus saves,
Yep.
and not just the ambiguity of what's all around it, what's on top of it. You know what I'm saying?
Yep.
The theological.
Either way,
Yeah.
yeah, it's like hold to truth, hold to being bold, be a masculine man, and you will be able to succeed in any of those arenas we talked about. But that's the most important thing at the end.
Agreed.
Thanks for tuning in, guys. Appreciate you being with me here. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff. Leave me a review on Spotify or Apple if that's where you're listening. Otherwise, I won't really know that you like it. I'm just kind of putting it out into the ether and don't really have visibility as to what kind of an impact it's making. So your comments, likes, reviews, etc., all really do help. Again, thank you for being here with me. and I look forward to seeing you next time on the path.